Mobile broadband is becoming a part of our daily life for the internet generation as we become accustomed to immediate broadband access in office and on the move. The current broadband system is clearly overburdened, and to meet this increasing demand, the industry has responded with 2 new wireless platforms. On this note, we initiate our next topic of first panel discussion, pioneering mobile broadband, LTE, and WiMAX deployment options.
To channelize and moderate the discussion, we have with us as our chairperson, Mr. Kunal Bajaj, partner, Analysys Mason. I request sir to kindly take a seat on the stage. Mr. Kunal Bajaj joined Analysys Mason following the acquisition of BDA Connect India, where he was the managing director. Sir currently heads the Analysys Mason's India operations. Sir founded BDA Connect India and as a managing director built it within 3.5 years to become a well-recognized strategy consulting company in the region. Sir started his career in New York with McKinsey & Company, covering various assignments on the telecom, internet and financial services industry. Sir has also been an advisor to the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India on various projects including driving internet usage and broadband penetration, spectrum policy, and lease line tariffs. Besides that, Sir has also advised on projects for the World Bank, multinational companies, venture organizations, and startup companies on various telecom projects. Sir has 3 degrees from the University of Pennsylvania, as well as finance bachelor's from the Wharton School. Welcome you, Sir, to COMMUNIQUE 11.
I now take up the opportunity to invite other distinguished members of the panel to kindly join us on the stage, please.
Mr. Tim Clunan, Regional Manager, Developer, Evangelist, APAC, Alcatel-Lucent.
Mr. Raj Sharma, Head Technologies, Aircel.
Mr. Jayasheel Shetty, Solution Specialist, NSN.
Mr. Gurpreet Kohli, Head Telecom and Network, HCL ISD.
Mr.Nagendra Venkaswamy, President, Tejas Networks.
Mr. Anil Kumar, Vice President, ZTE. On behalf of Symbiosis Institute of Telecom Management, we welcome you all.
I would now request our chairperson, Mr. Kunal Bajaj, to kindly preside over the discussion.
Great. Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to have so many people here. I think we've got an excellent topic for discussion, looking at broadband deployments, wireless broadband deployments going forward in the Indian scenario. Again, I'd like to thank SITM. This is an excellent, as always, annual event, amazingly organized, very well put together, excellent group of speakers. What we're going to do is take the next 45 minutes or so to have a discussion amongst all of the experts here on the panel this afternoon. We'll make sure that we leave enough time at the end for question and answer from the audience, so please make sure you think of good, hard questions to ask our colleagues up here on the panel. What we're looking to discuss today is essentially how do we see wireless broadband being rolled out in the Indian environment over the coming years. And to do that, we've got a good mix of operators, services providers, and OEMs or vendors to give us their viewpoints. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to kick off the discussion by going to our operator colleague, Raj, and asking him what his view is in terms of his expectation for what wireless broadband is basically going to bring to the Indian environment.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah. So, good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I would also like to thank SITM for giving me this opportunity. We are very pleased to be associated with SITM in this wonderful event. It's a very good campus, and I think it's a great focus from the SITM towards not only the academy, but also the bringing everyone close to the industry, and congratulations for that. Okay, so coming back to this particular agenda of this panel discussion, I'll agree first of all the way it was told at the beginning that the 2G, 3G may not be able to sustain the data growth that is yet to come in our country, and the LTE WiMAX will become one of the most important carrier for taking the data things forward. From the carrier's point of view, I would like to start with that. What are the various criteria that we had taken into consideration while choosing that which one do we do, whether LTE or WiMAX? So this definitely are not only the technological reasons, but there are other reasons that we actually look into while deciding this. The foremost is that the natural evolution that what we do today, which is a 2G or the 3G or the mobile-based kind of products or the subscription that we have or the ecosystem we have, how do we take the same one into the future? That's the one of the most important criteria. The other one is that whatever we launch, whether LTE or the WiMAX, it should have a fallback ability onto the current 2G, 3G networks, because definitely it will not be possible to build LTE or WiMAX networks everywhere in the beginning. So there will be a high possibility of subscribers falling back to the existing networks. So this technology should support that. The other thing is the mass marketization possibilities. So the first two will definitely make it mass marketization, because anything that we do in the future, from the business point of view, it has to have a possibility to become a mass market. Otherwise, serving a niche kind of a market with that huge amount that we have paid for the auctions, for the spectrum, definitely we're not going to break even that fast. The other things are that all technologies, as we see, are converging into the LTE advanced, even the WiMAX. So it means we have to work, or we have to invest into the technologies where it has more future-proof than the others. So considering all this, we thought that the LTE will be the best technology to do work, and we decided to work on the LTE.
Great.
Yeah, what we would ask from our vendor ecosystem here is that the solutions has to be very cost-effective, the deployment has to be very cost-effective. So I will request my colleagues to show us guidance that how we work on this, how do we monetize our networks at the most possible way. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Raj. I think what we can do is we can go to your colleague to the left, Jayasheel. Can you give us your perspectives on basically how the technology roadmap or the deployment roadmap is going to look, given what you've heard Raj basically tell us about what the operator community expects from these technology deployments?
Yeah. Thanks. Good afternoon, everybody. So basically, in terms of technology, from LTE standpoint, there are two variants that we have currently running in global. One is the FDD version, and second is the TDD version. So currently, we have something around 25 operators who have commercially deployed FDD, frequency division duplex. But for TDD, currently we don't have a single operator who has commercial deployment. So in terms of technical difference, I would say technology difference between TDD and FDD is that TDD is like an unpaired spectrum, and FDD is a paired spectrum. In FDD, you can have two carriers dedicatedly, like for example 20 megahertz uplink and 20 megahertz downlink. But in TDD, in the same spectrum, you either transmit or you receive. So in India, the spectrum that has been auctioned, it's a TDD spectrum basically. So in terms of roadmap, TDD I would say is a bit behind as compared to FDD. So we are seeing something around 6 to 8 months of I would say roadmap delay for TDD as compared to FDD. But there are still, I would say, pros and cons for both FDD and TDD. For example, in FDD, you would have the bandwidth fixed. So the peak throughputs in a FDD network, would be fixed. But for TDD, you can play with the downlink to uplink ratio. So if an operator is requiring more download, you would try to tune, more downlink, I would say, percentage. So you have different schemes here. You can have 70% downlink and 30% uplink, 60% downlink or 40% uplink. So you can play with the downlink and uplink rates. And the beauty is that with 3D, currently we can achieve more than 100 Mbps throughput, the peak throughput that can be achieved. And we have, I think, shown in multiple trials with all the operators. So this is the basic technology difference between FDD and DDD.
Great. Thanks, Jayasheel. Why don't we go over to Anil and get your view also on what you think is going to be the deployment roadmap and the technology evolution in terms of looking at how we see these technologies being deployed and used in India.
Thanks, Kunal. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I thanks Symbiosis for giving opportunity and part of this discussions. As everyone knows, the deployment comes in last. Actually, the realization of any technology or realization of any kind of deployment, technology or LTE or WiMAX happens after deployment only. So for deployment, the major concerns is that but the main I expect that the planning should be very proper. And then second is that, as we everyone know, seen just 15 minutes back, is the bandwidth or the transmissions, because this is one of the major roadblock I can say for realization of the LTE. And third one is the quality of deployment, because the quality of deployment means because as Mr. Raj Sharma said, they invested, the operator invested already huge money. Okay, the realization of money also they expect in the faster way. So there is a huge pressure for us, because the implementation, it may be they expect to be happen within 3 months or 6 months. So there we have a huge challenge in deploying a quality of a network. So because there is a lot of people are involved, sub-vendors, RFT, so many people are involved. So bringing quality into the network is highly challenge for us. And then is definitely end of the day, satisfying our customers is, I feel it's a very challenging job. Then as one of the requirement is also cost effective with the quality, deployment is very, very challenging for us. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Anil. So, I think clearly one of the bottlenecks that we're going to face in the deployment is really this entire piece about how we're going to meet the backhaul requirements. Clearly today we don't have a lot of fixed connectivity, and I think we heard the previous speaker from Sterlite basically talk about only 18% of towers being connected to fiber in India versus in China almost 90%. So Nagendra, what's your view? How are you helping carriers to meet and overcome this challenge that they're going to be facing?
See, mobile backhaul will eventually carry all this traffic. What is LTE required to deliver to an operator? LTE is required to deliver low latency, high capacity, and all IP traffic. Now, we're going to understand that LTE is today a technology for the operator. For the time being, certainly, it's not driven by applications. And therefore, the impact on the consumer is limited, if at all, for the foreseeable future. So, if you really look at it today, LTE is already a part of the plan of an operator. Now the question is, how do you ease him into LTE without making his legacy investments a sunk investment? That's really not what you want to do. Secondly, if you really think about it, TDM traffic is not going away. It's not going to be all IP overnight. It's not that we only have 12.5 million broadband subscribers. So at the end of the day, what you really want to do is to provide a path to the operator by which he can use his existing equipment and with minimal additional equipment, move him gradually towards an all-IP network. So really what we are looking at and what companies, I think, across the world are looking at is what we call a hybrid or a flexible network that will carry natively both TDM as well as IP traffic. If you can give them a path where you carry both TDM and IP and gradually move towards 100% IP over the next few years, then that's really what you want. You protect his existing investment and also allow him to move gradually towards an all-IP network. And that, to me, is the challenge, and that's really what we are addressing.
But will we see multiple backhaul networks running at the same time? One for 2G, one for 3G, one for 4G? I mean, how will all of this basically converge?
See, I believe that we are a little lucky in India in the sense that 2G traffic, to me, will continue in certain pockets for the foreseeable future. But LTE is coming on the heels of 3G. And, you know, like Raj said, all of them are going to coexist. But it just depends on how quickly LTE really gets adopted in the country. It is not really a very expensive technology. It's very volume-driven. If you really look at it today, the large global operators like Verizon, China Mobile, Vodafone, they've already started deploying LTE. And when the volumes of equipment pick up, the prices, like mostly, is going to start coming down. And I don't see why that will not happen in India. The real reason why one or two of the operators who are pretty much ahead on deployment have not yet deployed is because there's a supply constraint of all things. There's a supply constraint on LTE equipment. One of the biggest licensees for BWA in India is not able to deploy because he can get 500 units of equipment, but he can't get 5,000 which he needs. So really, the availability of the equipment is going to be one of the drivers of deployment in India. And I think that at least for the next 2 to 3 years, all the 2G, 3G, and LTE is going to coexist.
I mean, before we get to services, I'd like to take, Jayasheel's view on that equipment, right? I mean, if we're talking about network equipment, let's not talk about devices yet, but just on the network equipment side, where are we? When will it be available in volumes and mass?
So, what I strongly believe here is that the network has just evolved. So currently, all the vendors, are, I would say, doing testing with large-scale trials with their first release. What I strongly believe is that, by next year, first half, at least the features, which Raj has been talking, like CS fallback or interworking with 2G and 3G, those would evolve with time. Because TD-LTE as of now, is a brand new technology and it's not accepted globally, except for China Mobile or operators like, some operators in Gulf, I would say. So it would really take time. I would say by second half next year, we should see the roadmaps aligned as per the operator requirements. And specifically, I think Bharti and Aircel would require an interworking with 2G and 3G because they would like to offload, the existing traffic for 2G and 3G in LTE, considering that we have 20 megahertz bandwidth in LTE. So I strongly believe that, this would evolve by second half next year, where we would have much more features and the requirements would be met as per the operator.
Okay, excellent. So Gurpreet, I mean, if we start thinking about the services piece, right, which is what is to be offered to enterprises, businesses, to the initial customer population that's going to be targeted for LTE, what do you see there?
So, first of all, good afternoon to all of you guys, and you are awake after the lunchtime, having your eyes open. The most important part which we need to answer is that we already moved into era of 3G. But I don't think anybody has seen a drastic improvement as far as the video is concerned or as the voice is concerned, okay? Still it's like a pain. And this pain is not only in India, it's across the globe. California suffers from the same future, everywhere it is the same. And with iPads and more tablets coming, your need for experience will be more and more. So I believe a plethora of opportunities is going to open up. We are going to challenge more and more the OEMs. We are going to challenge more and more the service providers to give us the services. We will be moving very fast towards IPv6 because each one individual will have an IP which he can carry non-native way. And then then the security questions can also be answered. Who sent this mail? Because as you are hearing from the August gathering here, you can go up to 100 meg, I don't know, 100 meg or 10 meg, even 10 meg we will reach. Then you will stop using the wired networks. And if you are purely on wireless, somebody has to track who sent the mail. Okay, and so there is a lot of services portion which is opening up, and end user customer experience is going to drive everything. So whatsoever the claims may be, till the time the end user is going to see the quality, things are going to be better for the OEM or for the service provider. So I believe what is most important for us is that for this gathering here, because you are just venturing into your new lives, I believe it's a very exciting world which is awaiting you. You're going to have plethora of opportunities. We don't know what challenges are going to come. We are also trying to wade our way through these waters, and you're welcome to the play. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Gurpreet. So Tim, I mean, you work closely with developers across the region, have worked with developers globally. What are you seeing in your interactions with them? What are you telling them to do? What are you telling them to think about? And what are they telling you that they need?
This is a fascinating area, and I would echo the other speakers. Thanks to the conference organizers. I've had a chance to interact with a number of students and faculty here so far today, and the first thought that I had was, please, when you graduate, be nice to me and give me a job, because you are better prepared and more well suited for taking the mantle in this industry than I could possibly imagine an industry being served. So I think this is good, and the fact that we gather here today, I think, is interesting, because it gives us a chance to step away from the client and developer interactions and to focus on, as an industry, how we move forward. And it used to be that we used to say things like, nothing happens until somebody sells something, right? And so until there's revenue, it doesn't really matter what business you're in. Today, I think nothing really happens until somebody writes an app, right? So it's the apps that are driving all of this story. If we just had voice, we wouldn't be here today talking about this. So these developers are creating apps. What do we hear? We hear it's hard making money. And the developers are looking to try to be able to make money. And if you look at very, very detailed analysis of who's making money off of the Google Marketplace or who's making money in the Apple App Store, it comes down to a very, very few. So developers are feeling a pinch, just like everybody else. But they're very interested in driving the standard of technology forward. So we're seeing things that are starting to happen that are very interesting. So who has a smartphone? Okay, cool. Who has played Angry Birds on their smartphone? More people that have smartphones. So Angry Birds I point to mostly because it's the kind of the current darling in the business in terms of app success, and everybody wishes that they were Rovio, right? But Rovio is doing something that's quite interesting in that they're driving up the consumption of bandwidth by improving the offerings that Angry Birds have. So imagine being able to play Angry Birds against your friends on the other side of the planet. Or imagine being able to archive your best Angry Birds session and attach it to your Facebook page. Probably not your LinkedIn profile. So, depending upon which job you're going for, right? So being able to do that puts strange pressures, because you have an app that can be acquired for free in any number of different marketplaces. You could buy a version of it if you wanted, but then all that money goes to Angry Birds or to Rovio. And so how do operators start to get a cut in this, right? Apple makes some money, Rovio makes some money. How do the operators start to become involved with it? And what we're seeing is we're seeing developers and content providers starting to reach out to operators to partner with them. So for example, I will put in your store a free version of the premium copy of Angry Birds if you let me have access to your data, and I'll split the revenue with you. So if you've played Angry Birds, you stand a 40% chance of having to purchase the Golden Eagle. And so the Golden Eagle gives you special powers as you play the game, and it costs $1. 40% of the people that have downloaded Angry Birds have tried to buy the Golden Eagle at least one time. So that constitutes millions and millions and millions of dollars of potential revenue that this app developer is going to operators and saying, if you give us access to data, then we'll help give you access to some of the revenue that we're getting. So it's coming down to this partnering on offsetting infrastructure costs. So everybody's being burdened with these extreme costs, and they're trying to figure out how they can share it so that it's not ultimately us as the consumer that are paying all of the bill, but Rovio is paying a little bit, your operator is paying a little bit, and the store provider is paying a little bit. So you get multiple players trying to help defer the cost. But right now the big story is probably one around economics.
Tim, I want to ask you a question. when you say that Angry Birds and the hosted Angry Birds is going to be used by everybody, so is Angry Birds developer talking to the telecom service providers that you give the right treatment to my application so that the user is having the experience which he desires should be delivered? So is he giving premium to the telecom service providers to do that, or that is coming in the coming future?
That was their intention. This came out in, I think it was in Read Write Web had originally reported on it, and they were talking about that. The other thing, this fits into this broader area of application enablement, which is kind of my personal thing, right? Being able to expose networks to developers to let them write more interesting apps. And this is why I don't write software and give it away for free in open source anymore, right? Is because there's something very, very interesting going on. So what Rovio has done is they've actually gone and said, if you'll allow in-app purchases with operator billing, then we will give you we'll give you a cut of the Golden Eagle. Or if you'll provide us access to data, we'll split revenue with you on Angry Birds. So they're actually, as a a small company, but a fairly powerful app provider, are pushing the envelope a little bit more in application enablement, and that they're actually going out and doing things that we as an equipment and services provider are trying to do. And they're actually, from the app developer's point of view, coming at it and pushing at it as well.
So the connected question was that tomorrow, do you see a scenario in which an app provider says that I will provide this app through only a service provider because the performance and the experience to this service provider is more, and I want to give that? Do you see that evolving? Because otherwise, he going to everybody, it might be that finally he gets suffered and the hits. Do you think this evolving? And network is only going to play a big role in the success of the app?
I don't think it'll evolve like that. I think that it would be, right now all of the developers are wanting to hedge their bets, and they're really trying to put a few eggs in each basket to be able to win. I think attaching to one store will be difficult for them. Largely, I mean, we haven't seen a lot of carrier stores be successful, right? I mean, we're competing against Apple and against Google and now against Amazon in kind of iOS and Android markets. So they're probably not going to make it an exclusive. Unless it were AT&T, right, or somebody like that, right? Then I'd make it exclusive, sure.
No, I think we've seen some interesting developer partnerships with some of the carrier stores that have kicked off in India. But like you said, no carrier store has been particularly successful in terms of scaling the way some of the OS and OEM stores have been, or even the independent stores like HR. Raj, just going back to you for a second in terms of, if we think about the discussion around the actual devices. We've heard a bit about the network, we've heard a bit about the applications. What do you think your customers need as the user interface, as the device? At what price point, and what type of usability and features are they expecting?
First of all, I would talk more about the deployment part than the devices. That costs us much more actually than the devices to begin with. And in fact, I was just thinking of asking a couple of questions that what are the possible ways that our vendors are thinking that it can reduce cost of the deployment and the operations in the country through some sharing kind of options, or through some how to use the existing things as much as possible. But coming back to your question of the devices, what we feel is that probably we'll have to do much more market research for the LTE, and we have to see more and more applications. What could be the applications which are LTE suits more, vertical applications, maybe machine-to-machine applications. So from the device and from the consumer's point of view, what we feel is that it has to be in the range of maybe $50 to $100. That's the point that we feel if we have to go to the market, maybe sometimes in the next half of the second half of the next year, as our colleague suggested. That should be the price point for devices. We feel that there should be the possibility of other devices also, like the CPEs or the handsets, maybe beginning 2013. So those should be also, we have to see, yeah.
Okay. And what will the users use? How will they use these devices? How will they interact with them?
Once again?
In terms of what do you foresee your customers wanting to use LTE-based devices for?
As we see, as Tim just spoke about the applications. So what we feel is that there are going to be multiple applications which are more data hungry, and which will be requiring much more data and more number of subscribers when they are there. 3G will definitely not be in a position to handle that kind of a data traffic, where the LTE has to be, playing this kind of a role of, giving more and more data. So what we feel is that the downloads and then the gaming are probably going to be the two most important kind of applications which will drive the data growth.
Great, thanks, Raj. So Anil, I mean, what is the feedback you're getting from operators as you're speaking to them about the level of density of deployment and the challenges that are going to be there from the deployment? What's the rollout model, and what do you think the timeline is going to be for that rollout model?
As concerned, like rollout, as it's mentioned, like it's anyway that the things is going to happen in the next half 2012 only. So the quantity, their focus is like major on cities like metro cities first. The metro city is going to come first. Then the quantity will be like, it's first they wanted to cover first metro, then metro cities, then B cities. That is the.
No, but I mean, are we going to see a complete blanket dense coverage the way we have in 2G, or are you going to see spots that are picked up that are more hot spots or hot zone type of deployment?
No, in metro cities, full coverage. That's what they're thinking.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I was just going to come to you next, actually, to comment on the same thing.
See, when new technologies come or are introduced in a market, I think they have a life of their own. I don't think any operator is going to be able to control deployment. If you see rollout of technology, whether it's 3G, broadband, all of that, it's not just being driven by operator economics, so to speak. It's being driven by government. It's being driven by NGOs. It's being driven by content providers. So it's not, with due respect, either Aircel or Airtel or Reliance who's going to decide whether in Orissa we are going to offer, in some remote part, whether we are going to offer 3G or not. It's going to be decided by a huge movement which is taking place in this country called inclusion. Whether it is economic inclusion, financial inclusion, information inclusion, all of it is going to happen. And there are force multipliers, which I believe are actually underway. We are discounting completely the government's initiative of rural broadband. It's going to cover at least 250,000 of our 650,000 villages. And that's going to be a reality within the next 18 months. 18 months is not a long time in this business. We are forgetting completely that the National Knowledge Network is going to connect 20,000 institutions in this country. And institutions are serious bandwidth users. Some of these scientific calculation can use up the bandwidth in the entire country. So what we are really talking about is, today, my assessment is, and very different from Gurpreet's over here, is the service provider is going to be an infrastructure provider, not fundamentally different from the electricity provider in our country or in any country. The electricity provider is required, though it's not an ideal situation in our country, but he's supposed to provide you reliable, measurable electricity 24 hours a day at the capacity that you want. And where does he make money? Normal lights and all that, fine. But if you use your AC for 2 hours a day, he makes some money. If you use it for 8 hours a day, he makes more money. So it's on a usage basis. So what is my expectation from the service provider is he will give me a big fat pipe, which is always on. He gives it to me at quality of service that I desire and when I desire. So I get X bandwidth when I'm browsing. I get X plus bandwidth when I'm watching a movie. And when I stop watching the movie, I get less bandwidth. When I'm watching a cricket match, my bandwidth automatically goes up. When I stop watching the cricket match, it comes down. So the ability to build networks like this is all that I believe in the foreseeable future is going to be the role of service providers. So from, when we look at backhaul networks, their job is to carry reliably, high capacity, high-speed traffic, low latency, and all of that stuff. And after that, the consumer really doesn't care whether it's LTE, 2G, 3G, whatever it is. So that's the name of the game. And then Tim is going to be dancing all the way to the bank when, you have a nice thing going there.
Thanks, Nagendra. So, I mean, Tim, just to go back to you to maybe the last comment before we open up for questions. Inclusion. I mean, you spoke about games, which is a very, sort of top of the pyramid, urban type of concept. What about applications for inclusion and applications for really bringing the masses onto wireless broadband networks?
Yeah, this is, I think, this is actually a really interesting area because it drives this question of consumption down to a really practical level, right? And it feels like in India it probably is going to start around education. Seems to be the piece, which is this empowering component for sure. And India's goals in terms of the next several years, in terms of the numbers of people that need to be educated, is incredible. And the problem's compounded in that there's a bubble coming through in the population right now that's sitting at kind of high end of secondary school, getting ready to enter colleges and universities. And how do you accommodate people for a short period of time, right? I mean, it's a baby boom of sorts that's passing through the education system. It did and had severe problems over the last half a dozen years in terms of primary and secondary schools, placing strains on how many people you can educate at a given time. When you start getting into higher education with bandwidth consumption and scientific calculations and chats that are happening on college networks, you begin to dramatically change that. So I think that it's going to start probably out of education, or it'll respond initially in education because that movement is already on, it's already happening. Beyond that, it feels, I mean, the early stuff that I've seen hitting kind of the lowest segments of the economy are really very, very simple apps that are just drawing upon SMS. And there will probably be continued enhancements off of that. So instead of being able to find prices for grains and pulses in 3 different markets near you and then being able to decide which market you want to take your grain to, we'll probably see the next generation of those more sophisticated apps. Maybe you can do online grain analysis and quality for carbohydrate content or something. That there may be some more sophisticated apps, but I think they'll probably come out of what's already being done to service the low end of the market.
Okay, great, thank you. No, so thank you everyone for your viewpoints and input on this. I think we have a few minutes left where we can take some questions from the audience. So just stand up, identify yourself. I believe there's a format for...
Good afternoon, panel. My name is Yugank Arora. I'm from Marketing and Finance, second year. And my question is that there was a huge gap in when 3G was deployed in India, and it has been deployed globally. Like in other countries, it has been a time when 3G and 4G, there was a huge gap in the time frame. But in India, just after the 3G auction, we are moving to 4G also. So how do you look at the scenario in which there was no 3G? Like we moved from 2G directly to 4G. How do you visualize such a scenario?
Okay. Raj, do you want to take that up?
Yeah, sure. There are a couple of reasons that I would say that here it is more pertinent to maybe move to 4G more quickly than people in the other countries have moved. And the first reason was that in 3G other countries got much more spectrum than it was given in India, just 5 megahertz, which is much lower than it can fulfill the requirements of the data in the country, right? The other countries had a lot more possibilities, up to even 20 megahertz of spectrum they got in 3G. Yeah. So that was one. Secondly, the 3G applications and the requirements were also low those times, maybe 5 years, 6 years back. But now they are much more data hungry applications, and the YouTubes requiring MBs of data if you download one just clip. So now the requirement of data is much higher. We have just 5 megahertz spectrum. We have so many operators, 10 sometimes or even more in every circle. So altogether, the requirement is going to be much higher. And that's the reason that we'll be requiring the LTE kind of broadbands much earlier, much sooner than it was required in the other countries.
Great, thank you. I think there was a question over here in the, right there. Thank you.
Hello. Good afternoon, sir. My question is to Mr. Tim. Firstly, I'm Sandeep from Marketing and Finance, second year. So I think the success of LTE lies in the fact in how it can differentiate itself from the current 3G and the fixed broadband networks. And for that, I think there's a requirement of end-to-end collaboration to actually utilize the complete thick pipe of LTE, right from vendors to the actual third-party service developers. So I think Alcatel-Lucent is involved in such kind of collaborations. So it would be great if you could give us some illustrations of such collaborations.
So the echo was throwing me off a little bit, but let me see if I can hit the question. This is actually something that I think is really interesting, because we talk about an environment where we're asking operators to put out tremendous capital investments, and then so now you've bought a big house and you have to put furniture in it, and it's a pinch, right? So we're looking in this mature market, and you can find this example in every market. As markets mature, you seek to share risk, and you seek partnerships, and you begin to build these coalitions. So that'll happen, and we're seeing that happen already. But I think the other piece that's happening is the operations side of it needs to become very, very good. And the comment on I want this big fat pipe, and we all do, right? We want it to be like the water company, right? We want to turn it on and the water is there, or as long as I pumped it up to the tank, the water is there, right? So and that's a lot, because we're asking an operator to give us everything, and are we willing to pay for it, right? And will we help to offset that cost, and how do we offset the cost? Do I pay more because I consume more, or do I pay more because I consume at peak usage times? And probably all of those things will happen. Do I share the cost with somebody that's going to sponsor me downloading the movie? So I can so all the while I watch the movie, I have to see the Netflix commercial at the bottom. We probably will, right? We'll see a half a dozen mixed models of this. And then we'll also see, and this is an area I think is quite fascinating, we'll see operators at the very, very high end of the market start to become very, very savvy in terms of how they control their network. So these automatically scalable networks, to me, are quite fascinating. I mean, I represent a very particular platform that's rated in terms of transactions per second. And I'm basically a gatekeeper. You ask me something and I hand you to the right spot, and I record that you asked me that, and I send it to my OSS, BSS, and I know that you asked me that, and I charge you for it. So if I have a system that's rated for transactions per second and I hit critical load, how do I deliver that same quality of service all of the time, right? So what I need to do is take advantage of cloud capability, dynamically scale, spawn another instance of my platform, handle the peak demand, and then have that spawned instance go away as soon as the demand goes away. So I think the networks are going to get really, really, really smart at the high end, but it all comes with the price, right? And that's the piece that we're going to have to come to terms with, I think.
Okay, I think we have time for one last question right here in the center.
Good evening, panelists. My name is Aditya. I am from Marketing and Finance second year SITM. So my question is, with plans to launch LTE TDD by some of the winners of BWI auction by 2012, how do you see that mobile broadband will provide some user-friendly user interface?
User-friendly interface. Who
Yes.
would like to? Gurpreet, you want to take a stab at that?
So are you meaning to say by this is that by having this mobile broadband, how it's going to enrich the user interface? Is that the question? Am I getting it right?
Right, sir.
So the point is very clear. When we go towards the mobile broadband and we are going to have fatter pipes, we are going to have various mechanisms rather than only going for the pipes only, by different caching mechanisms to bring that user experience in such a way it is measurable, predictable, and that is the only thing which is going to keep user attached to the service provider, and that's where it opens up the plethora of opportunities for the service providers to play a bigger role in the whole ball game.
Thank you, Gurpreet. Thank you, everyone, for staying awake through the session, asking some very good questions. I'll hand it back over to the students. Thank you.
Thank you, respected panel members. for sharing their valuable insights on the lobe-sided analysis of technical feasibility and business profitability of LTE and WiMAX network. The discussion also enhanced our understanding on LTE getting an edge due to backward compatibility with the legacy network. It was indeed an enlightening session. Now I would invite my colleague to felicitate our esteemed dignitaries with mementos as a token of our appreciation. We thank all our panel members to have joined us and would now request them to kindly take their seat amongst the audience.